Hi everyone, I'm Jen from My First Shiba, and my lovely co-star for today is Kitsune. Hi, how are you? Today I'll be going over the topic so many of you have been asking me about. How do I feed my 5 Shiba Inus? First things first, I'm not a vet nor a canine nutritionist, but just a dog lover that does a ton of research who only wants the best for her dogs. On nutrition, here's my views in a nutshell. I believe fresh is always best, and I try to feed my dogs fresh as much as possible. I like to offer my dogs a rotating diet full of diverse ingredients that are as nutrient dense as possible. Balancing my dog's diet is important to me, and I supplement with various vitamins, minerals when necessary. But I'm also careful not to go overboard about it. It's important to understand that just like a human's diet, a dog's diet does not have to be balanced for every single meal. Balance is naturally achieved over time through a diverse diet and necessary supplements. I am generally anti-kibble, and only fairly recently have I been incorporating a little bit of kibble into my dog's diets. That's because, as many of you may know, the commercial dog industry was, well, for a lack of a better word, quite yucky in the past. And only recently, more and more ethical dog food companies have been stepping up and offering quality and, most importantly, safer kibble options than what was typically available a decade ago. Do I feed raw? Yes, I do, but not all the time. I know there are both pros and cons to feeding raw, and there are also pros and cons to feeding lightly cooked foods. That's why my dog's meals are diversified to get the benefits of different types of tastes, textures, and consistencies. As far as meal frequency, I feed my Shibas, depending on the Shiba, 1 to 2 meals a day. I know there's some controversy around once a day feeding. It's important to understand that every dog is different, and some dogs may actually prefer once a day feeding due to their appetite. I don't feed only once a day all the time, and it all depends on my individual Shibas and how their appetite is for the week. Even if I try to feed a Shiba that doesn't want to eat twice a day, if they don't want to eat twice a day, they just won't eat. So by default, that makes it once a day feeding. Also, if the particular Shiba is only having 1 meal, I always supplement with nutritious snacks. Dogs that shouldn't have only 1 meal a day are dogs that are voracious eaters and are at risk for bloat, as well as very active dogs that need that extra caloric energy. Other than that, studies have actually shown that dogs fed once a day had better health markers than dogs fed more often. And that's kind of interesting, right? Okay, finally on to the good stuff. Let's get our Shiba cuisine on. Now, I have 5 Shiba Inus of different ages from 1.5 to almost 14. So their needs, preferences, and meal schedules will vary a bit. I think the best way to show you guys my feeding routine is to spotlight every Shiba Inu one by one. That's kind of cool because you'll also learn some of the weird eating quirks my Shibas have. The majority of my Shiba's food comes from lightly cooked fresh meals painstakingly made by moi. I typically make large batches that I freeze, though depending on what us humans are eating for the day, I may make their meals at the same time I prepare the human cuisine. So here's a look at what's inside my freezers. I got the homemade fresh food packed in these handy reusable containers. I don't normally like using plastic for my dog's food, but when I use these containers, I always pack them when the food is already cold, and then they go straight into the freezer. I'll never use them to heat up food, etc. And for kibble, here's one of my favorite brands that I like and trust, Open Farm. Now, the thing with high quality kibble is that its price per pound, it costs the same or even more than fresh food. So yeah, it can get really pricey, especially when you have multiple dogs like myself. So I do also buy more affordable options that I feel I can safely give to my Shibas. It may not be the creme de la creme of kibble, but would be a fine option since I'm mostly feeding fresh anyway. Some of my favorite budget kibble options include Wholehearted Dog Food from Petco as well as Wag by Amazon.com. Also, I always try to keep my pantry stocked up with canned foods that I can use when I'm out of fresher options. I like to have sardines, red wild salmon, white chicken meat. Okay, now on to my Shiba's eating profiles. Kitsune is my current oldest girl and my absolute ride or die Shiba Inu. She is the absolute chowhound of all the Shiba Inus and really is just all about the food. Kitsune is on a 100% fresh food diet with an emphasis on lean proteins, vegetables, and nutrient-dense ingredients. I watch her fat intake as she has dealt with pancreatitis in the past. Kitsune eats 2 fresh meals a day. Pupper is my soon-to-be 6-year-old Shiba, and he can be quite finicky and picky with his food. He often does not like to eat very early, and he has a fluctuating appetite. Sometimes he can go for weeks with a pretty hearty appetite, while other times his appetite is smaller and he doesn't always finish his meals. Pupper doesn't like a lot of vegetables, so I need to be sure not to add veggies that he doesn't like into his meals, or he might refuse the entire meal. Pupper also prefers his food to be separated so he can sniff and choose what he wants to start on first. Pupper eats mostly fresh food and some open farm kibble. He actually loves crunchy food and seems to do really well with open farm dog food. Pupper is fed mostly twice a day, but sometimes closer to once a day when he refuses his morning meals. Yaye is my second oldest girl that I got when she was already around 5 years old. She's about 9 years old now. Yaye loves most food and has a hearty appetite. She's not quite the chow hound as Kitsune and will never lose her dignity just to get food. Yae definitely does not have a sweet tooth, and occasional treats like cream, not her favorite. Yae eats a fresh diet and different types of kibble once to twice daily. Kinai is a 7-year-old male that I got recently. I'm still learning his meal preferences, but for the most part, he enjoys most types of foods. He really seems to love fresh proteins like steak, chicken, eggs, as well as avocado. I noticed that Kenai has a preference for drier food and doesn't like it if his meals are too wet. That's likely due to the fact that he's used to kibble a bit more than fresh foods. I give him homemade food as well as kibble once or twice daily. Anzu. Anzu is my youngest at 1.5 years old. She is the smallest Shiba that I've ever owned and doesn't have a very large appetite. At times, she may not want to eat either due to her appetite or something that may be bothering her, like firework noise or thunder. She eats both fresh food and kibble with an emphasis on higher calorie offerings to encourage further development. Anzu is quite picky about the size of her food and doesn't like taking too big of a bite, so everything must be cut small for her. I give her homemade food as well as kibble once or twice a day. Now that you've seen what I feed my 5 Shibas, you probably have some questions about preparation, ingredients, storage, and just tips in general. I'm going to cover each section in deep detail in future content, so be sure to subscribe if you like the content I'm sharing so far. But to get you off running, here are my 5 quick start tips to making fresh homemade meals for your Shiba Inus and or other dogs, of course. Quick start tip number 1. Gradually add new foods to your Shiba's diet and don't do drastic changes. You want to make sure that your Shiba doesn't have any food sensitivities, as well as let their stomach adjust to the new ingredients. Quick start tip number 2. Shop local when possible and buy what's in season. Check out places like your local farmers market and local butchers. Be especially on the lookout for good sources of local fresh proteins. For example, I live in Hawaii, and Hawaii has a problem with an overpopulation of excess deer. I'll stock up on deer meat when available and at a good price. Deer meat or venison is an excellent source of lean meat for dogs. Quick start tip number 3. If you're totally new to making fresh food for your dogs, make sure that your Shiba's diet mainly comes from a balanced meal source, whether that be commercially made fresh dog food or kibble. You can supplement plain kibble with fresh ingredients that you have available. Quick start tip number 4. Use a supplement from a company you can trust. When it comes to animal products, many companies know that pet products aren't regulated as much as human products. Quick start tip number 5. Be sure you know what types of human foods are harmful to dogs and make sure your family knows this as well. Be especially careful about common human ingredients that you may not know are toxic to dogs. These include various nuts, nuts such as pecans, macadamia nuts. Also toxic to dogs are grapes, apple seeds, avocado seeds, cherries, xylitol, which is the artificial sweetener, chocolate, and star fruit. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. My Shibas and I hope you and your Shibas have a great time learning and experiencing the joys of eating fresher and healthier. In practically no time, you're gonna see how feeding fresh can improve your Shiba's vitality, health, and most importantly, zest for life. Thanks so much for watching.